Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, December 6th, 2021. Time for another show. And, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what to tell you. Distracted this morning with a number of things going on in the home. But we're all set here, ready to go, thankfully. A little bit of a late start to things, but all things on the up and up, thanks, Justice. We get the thumbs up, and, of course, the Rafto story is already on its way in, thanks to Greg. Lots of... looks like a lot of things got updated over the past couple of days. All the software decided to update itself. I don't know if this happened to you this morning, but Twitter sort of reset itself on me today and required a login for the first time in 100 million years on my phone. And, I don't enter the the password all that often. It just took me a little while to get things straightened out. And it's still not all quite right. But I see also, it looks like Skype maybe has updated itself and put some new colors into the scheme here today. A little disorienting. So, all right, not a big deal. I think we can deal with all of this and move on from there. Let's see. I see in front of me, is this I can't tell if this is a joke or not, but people retweeting what I guess is... supposed to be, I don't know. I mean, it looks to me like I guess it's a mock-up of a fake Christmas card from Trump, but you can never tell whether he's serious or not. I mean, I guess he's not, because I don't know that he would have chosen this photo of him. I have to imagine this is somebody's mock-up, but there's nothing on here that immediately screams out that it's totally fake, but I guess that it is. But it has a picture of him from his... Do you remember the time he had to put on white tie and tails when he was visiting in England and at the reception at Buckingham Palace? And he insisted... I don't know exactly how it happened, but he insisted on a... what's the white vest that they wear? Is that a waistcoat underneath? I don't know. I don't dress in white tie and tails. Well, I don't think I ever have. But at any rate... You remember that he had that enormous, gigantic vest that stuck like a foot out below his jacket, and I don't know. Anyway, so that's on my screen, and it's very distracting and disoriented, really, honestly, to see that at all. But okay, on to other things. The morning tweet, of course, has arrived on time. I've got it here, thanks to Bill. That'll get us on our regular footing here. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, apparently. It turns out to be the case. Kagro reminds you that Hanukkah ends at sundown, so be sure to call your insurance agent and cancel your dreidel accident coverage. Okay. That could be so. And, yes. All right. Well, I guess that pretty much covers everything. Woo. All right. Eastern Orthodox Hanukkah, of course, coming up sometime in the next couple of days. Of course, they don't do that. You know how it goes. I don't know. What's been going on over the weekend? Let's see. There are a couple things I pocketed. There's a lot of chatter this morning. There's some interesting stories that, actually, if I review, I should take a look through Greg's raft and see which ones he's going to touch on so we make sure we don't overlap too much here. But no, it looks like we'll be all right. Yeah. One of the items that he's put aside, though, is among the, the morning's most talked about, from what I could gather, in between having to deal with the mechanics of making Twitter work on the phone. Department of Defense Inspector General's report on the Capitol riot of January 6th, apparently causing some problems today. Politico running with the headline, Absolute Liars. So that's usually rarely a good thing. Absolute Liars. Ex-DC Guard official says generals lied to Congress about January 6th. In a 36-page memo to the Capitol Riot Committee, Colonel Earl Matthews, I don't believe we've heard his name before. And here comes the new color scheme, along with Greg's call in here. Let's see. It seems like there's a little bit of volume left on
Well,
the
it
laptop
worked.
that it should. Yeah, it seems to have worked, but it gave you some new colors, which is nice.
Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah, right. So everybody gets different shades
Unicorns.
of green apparently today. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Whenever they decide to do something like this, it's very disorienting. I'm a creature of habit, and I don't like to have new colors on the screen.
Well, just make sure
Doesn't
I'm
make any
blue
sense.
and not red, that's all.
Well, it gave you green.
Green's
time,
okay.
wasn't it? Okay, so we're all right
I
with
can
green.
live with green.
Okay. Well, it did. Oops, there we go. It's the D.C. National Guard calling to correct the record on things today. It says here, as we let those rings pass on, a 36-page memo to the Capitol Riot Committee, that's the 1-6 committee, Colonel Earl Matthews, also slams the Pentagon's Inspector General for what he calls an error-ridden report. And I'm not up to speed on exactly what's going on here, but I see a lot of people complaining
why I'm
about
here.
things. Okay, well, that's good. I'm glad you got a chance to take a look at it earlier. I have been, okay, I'll read this later. That's about the extent of my involvement so far. All right. Well, it doesn't have to be
Okay,
your
well,
first
read
thing.
it. Read it second.
We'll do that. Okay. And
Because the thing that you should read first,
all right,
which would
yes.
make the whole story make a whole lot more sense, is this piece by Kate Brennan and Ryan Goodman, which was published in May of 2021 in Just Security,
Okay.
called The Official and the Unofficial Timeline of Defense Department Actions on January 6th. And what they do is they take the actual transcript / timeline that the public Department of Defense folks made available to everybody.
All right.
And then they added in blue, so you could clearly see what they left out, stuff that's already in the media that's from other sources that they added to the timeline. And so they call this the official and the unofficial timeline of Defense Department actions.
All right.
Okay. So, for example, on Thursday, December 31st, New Year's Eve, before the riot took place, before the insurrection took place, Mayor Muriel Bowser and Christopher Rodriguez, D.C. Director of Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, delivered a written request for D.C. National Guard support to D.C. Metro Police Department and Fire and Emergency Service.
Okay. So
It's Thursday, December 31st, trying to prepare for what was coming.
Huh. All right.
Okay. What they left out on Friday, January 1st is, in addition to that, according to his testimony, Major General William Walker, commander of the D.C. National Guard, and he was the guy that was frustrated that the Army wouldn't let him deploy, sends a letter to Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy requesting approval for the mayor's request. So multiple people, including the D.C. National Guard itself, were trying to pre-position stuff.
Okay.
Okay, and they left that part out.
And this is left out of the Inspector General's report?
Left out of the Inspector General's report.
All right. Very good.
So already you're looking at this and saying, well, we already know this and this was left out, so they're making some mistakes already.
Okay, I'm following so far.
All right. The other thing to follow is the difference between mobilize and deploy.
Right.
Right?
All right.
If we give you permission to mobilize,
Yes.
that means that you get to wake up your family, get breakfast, and be prepared to go to school.
I see.
When I give you permission to deploy, that means you get to get in the car and go.
Right. Okay.
Not until then.
Makes some
If you
sense.
mobilize but don't deploy, you can't leave the house.
Yeah. You mobilize in the area. Like I'll become mobile, but I won't leave. Okay.
Right.
I gotcha.
Again, Sunday, January 3rd, this
Like
is the
that's
official.
a little misleading, but
DOD confirms with U.S. Capitol Police that there's no request for DOD support. Well, I just told you there was.
yeah. That's not
Right?
so great.
I just told you there was, and then 2 days later they confirmed, nope, there isn't.
Okay.
Okay?
Good confirmation.
The next
Thank
day,
you.
Monday, January 4th. This is all before this even started.
Yes.
U.S. Capitol Police Chief Stephen Son, Senate Sergeant-at-Arms Michael Stenger, and House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving meet to discuss a possible role for the D.C. National Guard on January 6th. In written testimony, Son and Irving disagree on whether there was agreement on the role the Guard should play. Irving testified, we did discuss whether the intelligence warranted having troops to the Capitol. Our collective judgment was no. And Son testified he approached Stenger and Irving to request the assistance because he had no authority to do so without an emergency declaration by the Capitol Police Board. And Irving told him he was concerned about the optics. Right. So he was another one about optics here.
Oh, okay. So this is
So already
second
they're fighting
optics.
among themselves about what they said and what they didn't say.
Mm-hmm.
And then following this suggestion, Sund, who seemed to be the most aggressive about wanting pre-positioning and pre-deployment, following the suggestion, Sund calls Walker, who's the D.C. National Guard chief, who tells him he could repurpose nearby National Guard and have them to meet fairly quickly once approved. So Walker says, I'm ready for this.
Okay.
Right? So that background of Walker, the guy in charge of the D.C. National Guard, knowing about this and trying to prepare for it, is part and parcel of that absolute liar thing. Because the Politico story is about what happened on January 6th when the D.C. local folks started requesting the National Guard. And Walker previously has said, I'm getting ready. I'm ready. All I need is permission. And General Flynn, Michael Flynn's brother, said, I don't like it. I don't like the optics. And then there's another lieutenant general also saying the same thing in the middle, who basically are stonewalling this and then denying they ever said such a thing. That's what the Politico story is about.
Okay.
So we know there's a timeline that looks bad for the Pentagon, and we know that the Inspector General left out a lot of key things when they were discussing what was going on here. Okay, and by the way, before the January 6th insurrection, Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, is arrested.
Right.
So they know what's going on here. It's not like, oh, we didn't have any intelligence. Well, how did you know that the Proud Boy guy was there, and why did you arrest him if you didn't know anything was going on?
That's a good question.
Right? On Tuesday, the FBI field office in Norfolk, Virginia, issues a warning that extremists are planning on traveling to D.C. The Inspector General left that out.
That seems odd. I mean...
Right? 12 o'clock, Trump begins his speech telling the crowd, we will never give up, we will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved. They left that out.
Okay.
They left out the word about a pipe bomb found at the Republican National Committee.
That seems important.
Right? They left out that Sund notified the two sergeants at arms that he urgently needed support and asked them to declare a state of emergency and authorize the National Guard. They left that out.
That seems directly on point, sir.
I mean, it's just full. As you start to go through it, what started out as all in black, the official thing, is now mostly blue.
Yeah, right.
Because they left everything out.
I see.
Everything. And
Well,
that's why that story, resonates. So it's really part of a trilogy.
Oh, well, no wonder.
So the first part is the way back in May, we knew that the Pentagon timeline was wrong. Today, Politico says ex-DC Guard official says generals lied to Congress about January 6th because they claimed that none of the stuff that happened. In a 36-page memo to the Capitol Riot Committee, Colonel Earl Matthews also slams the Pentagon's Inspector General for what he calls an error-ridden report. Now, the point about all of this is this is going to the January 6th committee, looking into what happened on January 6th.
Well, yes.
So why is it relevant? Because that's really the reason for all of this. This is not just he said, she said in the political press that loves gossip. And that's where the third piece in the trilogy comes in. And that's just published in Rolling Stone. The January 6th committee is promising it has the goods. We're about to find out.
Well, it's about time. I mean, it's December 6th now, and we're a month away from the anniversary.
Several weeks of public hearings that will tell the story of the riot at the Capitol in vivid color are coming in 2022.
Well, okay. That's January.
Right? Now, have I read it? No. You got to be a subscriber.
Oh, well, okay.
But, that's the point, really. The point of doing all of this is because January 6th committee is the one that's getting all of this information. The January 6th committee is the one that's going to look and see what's going on with that timeline and decide what's true and what's not true and who's the liar, not Politico.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
Oh, good. Yes. Well, I wouldn't want to leave it up to them. As between Politico and the committee, I'll take the committee. That's true. I'm not feeling
that's what I'm saying
here.
here.
All right. Well, I'm willing to go ahead with that. I hope that they do have something. The time, you could say, is right. I don't know whether it's, at this point, whether it helps or hurts. I don't know what the optics of actually finally discussing some of this stuff a full year later is going to be. Either, I mean, it lends itself to Politico and Republicans saying, it's already a year old now. Talk about old news. Oh, my God, a whole full year. Forget it. Let it go. Versus, no, we've never done anything.
Okay, so the bad news is apparently I do have a subscription to Rolling Stone, so I can read the story.
Well, that is bad news, I think, except...
And, what they're talking about is how public the public spectacle will be. Cheney's announcement signals a new phase of the investigation in which the committee will push the machinations behind what happened on January 6th into public view.
That sounds good.
The makeup of the forthcoming hearings is unclear, but the fact that they're public and will last for several weeks should cement January 6th as the key issue throughout the 2022 campaign season. Good.
Yes.
That's one of the two things that I'll talk about in terms of campaign season. The other will be the public good, and that will be after the break probably.
Could be good
Maybe
news for John
beforehand.
McCain.
We'll see. One figure of interest who seems open to testifying publicly is Bernie Kerik, the former New York City police commissioner and pal to Rudy Giuliani. Politico reported on Thursday that Kerik won't provide documents unless he's allowed to testify. He previously said he'd comply with the subpoena, but demanded the committee apologize to him for making false statements. Alex Jones, a conspiracy theorist who reportedly helped plan the rally at the Ellipse, and Jeffrey Clark
Yes. I didn't think they would
have also indicated they'll be open to testifying publicly. The committee probably won't be interested, though. Public testimony makes it easier for witnesses to coordinate the stories, which would make it more difficult if the committee to piece together what actually happened on January 6th, rather than what a bunch of Trump allies want people to think happened.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So, in other words, they're not stupid. Alex Jones,
not totally,
who makes a living, being on TV and in front of the camera, lying about stuff and trying to make it look like it all makes sense, would like 3 days of your time,
no problem,
so that he can be televised on
that's not
CNN.
These things work, but
and they said, no.
Right. Well, that's an unusual request.
That's the main thing I learned from this story.
Wow.
And then it's easy to focus only on the big names and what they're doing, but Cheney promising weeks of vivid color recounting what happened is a reminder that the committee's been in touch with an untold number of other figures who were swirling around Trump's efforts. Chairman Benny Thompson said on Thursday they've interviewed 250 people, most of which have cooperated voluntarily. The committee seems confident they've already drawn enough to paint a clear picture of why, how, and at whose direction hundreds of Trump supporters were able to break into the Capitol in a violent attempt to overthrow American democracy. We'll see next year.
Okay. I mean, I get it. We got to do it slowly and carefully. I mean, if the answer's not Trump, I'll be surprised. But Trump plus.
It would be irresponsible not to speculate, but let's see what happens.
Gosh. All right. Well, we're going to get this on I guess we'll be working on it on the anniversary, which, hopefully they can capitalize on and make it interesting and relevant as opposed to.
Yeah, it'd be great if it started on
news.
January 6th. But, between now and then, we have a month's worth of leaks coming out, which would be great.
Oh, okay.
Directed leaks.
Yeah,
like
I
the
hope
Politico
so.
story.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that. That's an interesting approach to things for witnesses who really eventually, under ordinary circumstances, would be, I guess, indicted for what they have done.
So might happen.
Yeah, trying to say, well, here's what I would like. I would like the testimony to be presented this way and on these dates.
No
and you
blue M&Ms in my bowl.
Right, yeah. They've got like green room demands. No, you're a witness, and maybe you'll be indicted at the end of this. But I understand, and they do well to capitalize on the opportunity for public testimony, and it's the sort of thing that people will back up and say, well, sure, actually, I'm glad they're willing to testify publicly. I'd love to hear it. I think it should be public, and they don't really get to the part where the committee says, well, in order for it to be usable, for instance, and for us to get a real idea of what actually happened as opposed to the coordinated story that the three of them are willing to present, we need to check in with them privately so that they can't check up on each other. And we have a prisoner's dilemma is what they're trying to set up here. And the usual public penchant for, I'd like for things to be public, doesn't include an explanation of, okay, well, we might not get at the actual truth or be able to to use that prisoner's dilemma to our advantage.
Well, I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on the internet, but as an observer, I would be most interested in the people who are already talking about pleading the fifth and whether or not they're going to be offered immunity in return for their testimony.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah,
an open
the
question.
prosecutors in that case have to decide, is it worth it, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Jeffrey Clark won't be prosecuted or indicted. But
That's
I'd sure
entirely
love to know
possible.
exactly what went on when he was trying to take over the Department of Justice in anticipation of this January 6th thing.
Yeah. Although I would love to see the prosecution. I mean, I understand the reasoning for it, but it very rarely plays out that way, too, at least in this setting with the congressional hearings that, the big cheese ends up getting prosecuted and said, usually the big cheese ends up not getting prosecuted, and we've given away immunity. So,
well, the big cheese is Trump, so
right.
I would trade Clark for
I
Trump on the chessboard.
but yeah, I'm just saying that I don't know. I need a better contract ahead of time because we keep doing it this way and offering people immunity and then saying, golly, it's just so we don't like the optics of prosecuting the big cheese after all. And then,
well, you know what? If you offer somebody immunity, you just got even more eyeballs riveted to what's going on January 6th in the televised show that Liz Cheney says she's going to put on.
All right. Well,
this isn't just a
it.
prosecutorial decision. I mean, as Armando has pointed out on the internet, it's not really a trade because they're not going to, prosecute Clark for much. And that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying that in my mind, I would easily give up on doing anything with Clark if he would spill the beans.
Yes. I would. I worry that they sometimes decide not to do anything with the beans.
Oh, you're a Democrat. Stop worrying about everything. Just watch the show.
Well, I have watched these guys do these a lot. There's a lot of. I hope this cheese is different from previous cheeses because a lot of previous big
runny.
cheeses have just kind of.
It's very runny, as a matter of fact.
Walked
in
away.
Fact, there may not be any cheese in the shop,
Right,
but that's not the point. This is a cheese shop.
All right. I'll sit and wait. There's no other alternative. But okay, I'm glad you found out you had a Rolling Stone subscription. That's good. Seems like good news.
It said, you can't read this unless you have a subscription. So I hit the login button. It said, oh, here it is.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe
great.
I have a subscription. I should.
What
look.
else do I have a subscription for that I didn't know that I'm paying for?
Right.
That's another story for another day, and not worth taking your listeners' time.
Okay. Although it's wise for you to check. Everyone should check.
Everybody should check, because they're auto renew, and so you don't even know anymore.
Right.
And unfortunately, in my line of hobby, because it's not really a line of work, I've clicked for a lot of I want to read that article.
Yes, right.
9 years ago, haven't read it since.
Oh, right, and all you have to do is tell us within 2 months that you don't want to subscribe, and it'll be canceled. Whoops. Yeah, I got a couple of those out there. Okay.
So
watch out.
It's my New Year's resolution is to go through my list and cull it. So we'll see.
All right, you won't do that.
So that basically is the politics part of the show.
Yes, all right.
One last thing to add to all of that, and that is that Karen Tumulty has a piece. Tune out those 2024 presidential race predictions. Biden will step down. Harris is in trouble. This, that, everything else. She says, go ahead, sucker. Bet on Reagan's reelection. That was the headline that ran in the front of this newspaper's Outlook on May 22nd, 1983.
Oh?
Reagan is in so much trouble, like he'll never even run, let alone win.
Huh. That seems
This is something she writes, I often recall as I read the frenzied handicapping of the 2024 presidential race, which appears to be congealing into conventional wisdom at an earlier point than any in memory. My question is, how would anybody know?
Okay.
And here's another one. Why are you even asking?
Oh. Well.
Given today's deeply polarized electorate, it's hard to imagine any candidate pulling off the kind of lopsided victory Reagan did in 84. But if anything, it makes early 24 predictions all the more ridiculous. Anybody old enough to remember election night 2016 should know that.
Okay. I mean,
right. She brings up Reagan because she just did
a
biography of Nancy Reagan, so she was looking at this sort of stuff.
I see. Yeah, I don't think anybody remembers that Outlook front page.
Right. So she finishes and says, look, I'm older now, and I'm hopefully a little humbler. I, myself, am embarrassed to admit that should McCain and Clinton each decide to make a bid, and most people around them expected, both would become the party's instant frontrunner in 2005.
What? Who?
Clinton could be declared unstoppable in her party's primary, and for McCain, the bet would be made in reverse. He can't win the primary, but he'd win the general election. I'm older now, she says, and hopefully a little humbler. Now, all I can say is this. Go ahead, sucker. Bet you can predict what's going to happen.
Oh, well, no.
Go
Nobody
ahead.
cares about
Make
that.
my day.
Okay, that won't stop anybody, and it's their job to continue to try to predict those things. I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, if next week she herself is making similar predictions.
Yeah, but, you know, there
But
was
it's nice
this
to hear once in
big
a while.
story. I can't even remember whether we covered it or not, that Dana
Probably not.
Milbank had written about the quality and timing. Well, the headline is, Media treats Biden as badly or worse than Trump. Here's proof.
I think we did.
After a honeymoon of slightly positive coverage, Biden's press for the past 4 months has been as bad at, and for a time worse than the coverage Trump got in a similar time frame. They used artificial intelligence to pick words to do that. The interesting part of that is Magdi Semrau, who tweets as Maggie J, says, in language, we have many words that describe the same or similar underlying meaning with different connotations. And she uses as an example. David Waltman has a unique podcast that's really worth listening to.
Okay.
Or
Yes.
David Waltman has a different podcast. Or David Waltman has a peculiar podcast that's really worth listening to.
Okay.
They all say the same thing, except they don't.
I see what you mean.
Right? Because
Okay,
when you
terrible
go
one
over
out.
stuff, you try to get the big general sense of things.
Yeah.
Whereas I am either, depending upon whether you like me or not, meticulous, selective, or picky. One's positive, one's neutral.
Okay. We've
One's
been over that
negative.
ground. Sure.
And she
Okay.
goes over about 9 or 10 other combos and talks about how that's how you get negative coverage from saying the same thing when you claim that you're really not being negative at all.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I did see that Milbank piece, but I don't think we got a chance to talk about it. Maybe we will.
Hi everyone, it's me, Gil. Minimal contributor to content, but regular contributor to funding for Kagro in the morning. Let's change things up from David's so very tired plea for your contributions with a plea of my own. If you want to add your voice to the show, do it. Record your own segment using your favorite recording device and send it to David. Read an article and give your opinion. Write your own essay and read that. The sky's the limit. Well, not really. Try to keep it relatively short so David doesn't have to stress about cutting it and hurting your feelings. Join the hallowed ranks of Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter and be part of this somewhat witty deep dive into political topics with unnecessary censoring. Lend your voice to the show by sending it to kagrox@gmail.com. KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll pick up where we left off because we never stopped. During the break, we kept going, kept discussing things.
And I'll tell you why.
yeah,
because,
good.
again, we're
I
discussing
don't know.
the whole idea of looking at things and framing them as either positive or neutral or negative.
Yes.
But saying the same thing, just picking the word you like.
Right.
And during the break, David and I tend to talk to each other, but that's because we're either chatty, conversational, or jabbering.
Right.
And, we have pretty strong opinions about these things. That's because we're either confident, secure, or egotistical.
Yes, it depends.
Well, why are we even going over this? Oh, well, it could be because we're inquisitive. Could be we're interested. Or it could be that we just like to pry.
Yes. Right. There's any number of interpretations. I found it weird.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between childlike and childish. Lightning and lightning bug, Easygoing and lackadaisical.
Okay. I understand those.
These are all things that the media picks, and as we were talking about, so it turns out a Biden official had posted or was moving around this story that Dana Milbank had written.
Yes, I saw it.
And tell me what you told me.
Well, I saw let me see. It's Ron Klain, who has picked up the
He's
very
pretty
article
active on
you're
Twitter.
talking about. Yeah. And he just this is interesting. I mean, straightforward. I don't know how you judge it any differently. So there's the article, right? Opinion piece. The media treats Biden as badly or worse than Trump, and here's the proof. And Ron Klain tweets it out with "submitted for your consideration." That's it. which I thought, I didn't think anything of that. Then I happened to notice one of our journalist friends, and I mean it, one of our journalist friends, somebody we normally wouldn't call out for this sort of thing, you wouldn't expect to, Alex Parker. So Alex Parker retweeting Ron Klain's "Submitted for your consideration" with the following commentary: "Self-pity isn't a good look, but it can, but also can seriously and negatively warp your tactics and strategy. Just ask the Clintons." That's the full comment. But self-pity isn't a good self-pity. Here's an article I read. Why are you so self-pitying? I don't recall saying anything about it.
So was it noted, submitted, or blasted out?
I don't know. Right, yeah, exactly. I don't know, but apparently it has self-pity involved in it. Dana Milbank said this thing. I note that it has been said. If he were a journalist, Ron Klain would simply say, I'm just reporting what was said here. Don't look at me. I'm not saying it was self-pity. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying this guy said that, and that's news. That usually works for reporters. But apparently not available to White House Chief of Staff.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, I just thought all of that was pretty fascinating.
It is. I didn't think about it the same way.
Let's look at another big picture thing since it's Monday, and big picture is a good thing to do from over the weekend.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about Omicron, what we know, what we don't know,
yes.
What's happening on the vaccine front, what's happening with the pandemic. And here's the setup for this, which actually is more politics, and it's going to veer into more public health at the end.
Okay.
But only if I confidently or egotistically try to make that link. You decide. We report, you decide. So this is a piece from E.J. Dionne, and it's a trio of pieces that basically say the same thing in different ways. The title of this one is Say It Loud, Democrats, Economic Issues Are Values Issues.
All right.
The prevailing tendency is to place our conversations into discrete boxes. And that's what reporters love to do. I'm an economics reporter. I'm going to talk about the jobs report. I'm going to talk about inflation and growth.
Yes.
Or I'm a politics reporter, so
yes.
I'm going to talk about values, abortion, LGBTQ rights, racial justice.
Get them all. Right.
And I am a congressional reporter, so I'm going to talk about spending programs.
Yes.
And EJ says, but how we deal with economic problems says a great deal about what we value. Or as we used to say in the old days when I was growing up, put your money where your mouth is.
Yes, all right.
We all knew this at one time. You can't just say, let's take all the economic stuff out of this and look at it separately, because the only thing that matters is whether or not it satisfies CBO or some committee that set itself up as a judicial arm of politics to decide whether taxes are fair or not fair.
Yes.
And it's nothing to do with what you're spending the money on.
Right.
Right?
True.
This is a strong preference for taming inflation over confronting suffering that a premature slowdown would impose on lower-income workers. So what you spend your money on is a values thing. It isn't just what does the CBO say?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a normal person's view of economics. Far more holistic.
And it gets to the point of what Democrats are trying to do here. You might sum up the way Will Bunch did in the second of the three articles.
Oh, right.
Where he writes 3 words, America forgot, that explain gun insanity, vaccine denial, student debt, and more.
Oh.
And he goes through, the weird stuff like Thomas Massey posing for a Christmas picture with his entire family armed to the teeth.
Yes.
And he says it's hard to think about all this sordidness about guns, the so-called rugged individualism that the Masseys put forth to mark a holiday meant to celebrate a communal season of hope, or how Jennifer and James Crumbly cared more about keeping their own kid in school with a clean record than the welfare of other students.
Yeah, we haven't discussed that weekend's developments. Yes, okay.
And not see that a lot of folks care a lot more about the tribalism of America's culture war than, say, keeping a rural hospital open.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That we don't want the same things. We just want what's ours. And a lot of pundits, he says, I guess includes me, he says, I spent a lot of time in recent weeks wondering why the national mood nearly a year into the Biden presidency is so sour, even with the buffoonery Trump banished from the White House for now. The economy surging back by most measures, especially jobs, and a Congress that, for all its flaws, has passed COVID relief and infrastructure bill and may do more. I think the trauma of the last 5 years or so has exposed something deeply damaged in the national soul, a common thread that's buried in almost every story, even when we fail to see it, no matter what the story. Okay. Especially when you think about things that could be done or haven't been done. And what he basically says is the three words that are missing is common good or public good. The common good, the public good. I see. This is why you do stuff. And that's why, for example, he says, over the past 4 decades, governments have slashed budgets and privatized basic services. That's from the third story in the trilogy by Anita Schroeder and N.N. Gopal that's in the New York Times. Over the past 4 decades, governments have slashed budgets and privatized basic services. This has 2 important consequences for public health and public good. Public health, public is foundational to both of those concepts. First, people are unlikely to trust institutions that do little for them. And second, public health is no longer viewed as a collective endeavor based on the principle of social solidarity and mutual obligation. People are conditioned to believe they're on their own and responsible only for themselves. So when you say, for example, and this is me talking, not the authors, that I'm going to have an argument with you on Twitter about whether or not masks work because I don't want to wear one.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Well, you're wearing one to protect everybody else.
Right. But
and they want you to wear one. Well, it's none of my business. Freedom.
Yeah. I certainly.
This is common good, public good.
Yeah,
right?
They don't
this
care
is why
about
you're doing this. And so the whole idea that you wouldn't even consider that, I noted on Twitter, it's interesting because I got a lot less arguments about vaccines this weekend with the Omicron variant than I did previously. Now they're arguing about whether masks work or not. And in that regard, I pointed out, and other people have pointed out, that it's interesting when you get the trolls. They're trolls.
Yeah.
Because they start bad-mouthing a particular article and then tell you you're an idiot for reading that article when everybody knows that this thing that I'm not an expert on, I'm going to assert is absolutely right, even though it's wrong. And how would you even question it? And then you get like 5 other people who you never heard of just all show up at the same time saying the same thing, obviously from their Facebook page or from their mutual feeds. And that's how you know you're having a troll infestation. And, the best thing to do is just either mute or block them. But in response to them coming in and then going away because I don't see them anymore, somebody posted this piece from the British Medical Journal from November, Effectiveness of Public Health Measures in Reducing the Incidence of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 Transmission, and COVID-19 Mortality, a Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, published 18th November 2021. So it's fairly recent. The abstract is to review the evidence and the effectiveness of public health measures in reducing incidence of COVID, transmission, and mortality. And this is a systematic review and meta-analysis. And they found that there were 72 studies meeting the inclusion criteria, 35 evaluate individual public health measures, 37 assess multiple public health measures. They were able to include 8 because they were able to compare how they were doing things, owing to heterogeneity of the studies. It wasn't possible for looking at the outcomes of quarantine isolation, universal lockdowns, and closures of borders, schools, workplaces. But the systematic review and meta-analysis suggests that several personal protective and social measures, including hand washing, mask wearing, and physical distancing, are associated with reductions in the incidence of COVID-19. Okay, and the mask wearing was pretty clear about how it helped. And I just mentioned that because when you're looking at all of them, all of the articles together, when people say, well, there's no evidence masks work. Well, actually there is.
There's plenty,
There's plenty. We talked last week about the Missouri study, I think.
Oh.
Did we? Where the Missouri legislature asked for a study from the Missouri Department of Public Health on the benefit of mask wearing.
I don't know. I don't think
the Department of Public Health showed that actually it cut down disease quite significantly And so the legislator refused to make the study public, and it only came to light because somebody put in a Freedom of Information request.
Okay, that does start to
So I had that on the Pundit Roundup probably
yeah.
Friday or Saturday then.
Maybe that's...
And, so that's a recent one. Well, that's not a peer-reviewed study. That's not a RCT. You can't, it doesn't count. But you can't do controlled studies on everything.
True.
It's unethical. You don't do a controlled study on whether or not parachutes work.
Right. Okay. Yes.
That's the classic example, but it makes the point. Any engineer will look at this and say, you don't need a study for this. You just need to engineer and see whether it works or not.
Yeah. Well, okay.
So RCTs, these controlled studies, are not the randomized clinical trials, are not the be-all and end-all of everything. They're a powerful tool, but not the only tool. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you go back and you look and say, okay, what happened? And that's how you know that St. Louis and Philadelphia handled flu differently in 1918. You didn't do randomized clinical trials on that and say, okay, Philadelphia is not going to mask and St. Louis will. Philadelphia will not cancel a parade and St. Louis will. You don't do it that way. You go back and you look what happened. And you still wind up learning a lot of valuable information. So when somebody says to you, well, it doesn't count because you didn't do a randomized clinical trial,
I see what you mean.
Sometimes that's not relevant.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in my
we didn't do the
terms,
parachute trial either, okay? So let's just look and see what we do know. And what we do know is that we have all these communities that didn't have mask mandates and these communities that did, and what's the difference? And it turns out that the ones with mask mandates did better.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's all over the place. I don't know. I keep going back to the
So you think,
but
no, you don't know anything. You're stupid. You didn't look at the random. There's only 2 random clinical trials, and actually most of them suggest a modest improvement. Well, it's modest. Well, the point isn't that masks are the be-all and end-all of everything. We all know that surgical masks are better than cloth masks, and N95s are better than surgical masks. And we also all know that none of them work if you wear them below your nose. And we also know that they're not being suggested in and of itself that's the only thing you do. We also know that this is supposed to be an adjunct to getting vaccinated, along with social distancing, along with hand washing. So, it just makes me tear my hair out when I see people say, oh, look at this person saying you should wash your hands. We all know it's airborne. It is airborne. But you're supposed to wash your hands, social distance, get vaccinated, and wear a mask.
Yeah.
It's not like only do this one and don't do the other 3.
I mean, washing your hands is a pretty good idea.
Especially after you touch your mask.
Yeah, true also.
And change your mask every once in a while and wash your underwear, and do all the things that, Well,
have they studied that,
though? Freedom. Well, this is public good, really. I promise you. Take a bath. It's public good.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I've always found, I guess probably I've been hearing stories about the masking. I've always found the anecdotes. I know you're not supposed to take that as your evidence, but these are always the ones that are more convincing to me. When you went back to Missouri, I thought it was, isn't it? Are we going all the way back to the barber shop in Missouri where the people were working inside masked and everything was fine, or no? Okay, an actual study. All right, great. So much the better. Yeah, I guess all those things people just dismiss as, well, that's, just anecdotes. It's not data. They give you that line again. Okay, right, sure, I understand. The Korean Starbucks, where all the baristas stayed in there all day masked and were fine, and the customers took their masks off and they're sick. Now, again, not I guess now we know, RCT, right? True also. But now there actually have been large-scale studies based on things that, I didn't ask this community to go unmasked for a year, but they did. So let's look at what happened.
Here's a study from the story in the New York Times. Missouri withheld data showing effectiveness of mask mandates. Mask requirements prevented COVID-19 cases and deaths in Missouri, the state found, but data supporting conclusion was not released until a month later. The state did not immediately share that data with the public. Instead, the information was released on Wednesday, a month later, because of public records request by the Missouri Independent, a nonprofit news organization that reported the findings in Documenting COVID-19 Project at the Brown Institute for Media Innovation. The records include an email dated November 3rd from the director of Missouri's health department to a staff member in the governor's office. The email included 2 graphs that compared the rates of reported COVID-19 cases and deaths in parts of Missouri with and without mask mandates. The director, Donald Karoff, said in the email there was many variables to account for when assessing the effects of mask requirements in Missouri, but the analysis ultimately showed such requirements were effective. I think we can say with great confidence, reviewing the public health literature, then looking at the results in your study, the communities where masks were required had a lower positivity rate per 100,000 and experienced lower death rates. The analysis compared reported case and death rates in the parts of the state without mask requirements with the rates in St. Louis County, Kansas City, and Jackson County, where mask mandates had been in place. And then they go on about the details. Governor Parson, a Republican, said he supports wearing masks to slow the spread, but has repeatedly spoken out against mask requirements. And he just wants everybody to be vaccinated. And in a statement posted on Twitter on Thursday, Mr. Parson reiterated his opposition to mask mandates and said the requirements infringe on our personal liberties. So when you quote the Missouri study to the trolls, they say, well, it's a New York Times article. I can't believe that.
I guess. But
well, what are you basing your stuff on? Because freedom.
Yeah. Which,
see,
incompatible.
You keep giving me all this data saying they work, and I'm saying this one is bad, that one is bad. You can dismiss this one. You can, this is the anti-vax thing. Mm-hmm. And then what you're left with, there's no information whatsoever. Therefore, there's no information saying it works. Plus, it clearly impedes upon my freedom, so don't do it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's how you get to that. Anyway, so who does it say anywhere? Who prevented its? I don't know what happened. Was it a release that should have happened of this report, and somebody just decided not to do it, or did they suppress it in some way? That I'm not clear on. I guess I'll read through it, figure it out, see if we can find out who did
clear.
it.
When referring to it, the governor said Director Kagro has consistently and publicly stated mandates are not the answer to Missouri's COVID outbreak, the exact opposite of what he said.
Another one of those executive
they do not
summaries.
Work and have collateral health consequences, which is exactly the opposite of what he said.
That one.
The governor's statement did not explain
much.
why his office chose not to publish the analysis it had requested.
All right. Well, I think we know.
It also did not explain why he's saying the exact opposite of what.
Yeah, not just the exact opposite. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there is an addressing in the report about the debunking the claims of negative health effects, but I mean that just seems like an add-on. I'd have to see in the report whether they really address it. But what a thing to say that it also says that there are negative health effects. And not only does it not say that, I don't even know it even addresses that.
Right. Now, one of the things that we learned that if you didn't already know,
it's stupid. Why would you
there are certain states, Florida immediately comes to mind, and I know this from knowing people who work in the hospitals down there.
Yes.
Okay. But Missouri is another one. And, we even see this in places like New York. The governor who allocates health funds has incredible influence on what the hospitals say and do.
Yes.
So if you're looking for the hospitals to be an independent group saying to, let's say, Ron DeSantis, your policies aren't helpful. Mm-hmm.
No.
The public aspects of those hospitals wind up getting replaced if they do stuff like that, and you put in political cronies.
Right, yes.
And so in Missouri, what happened is in November 2020, a year ago, Missouri's hospitals asked Mr. Parson to issue a statewide mask order as hospital administrators struggled to find beds.
Right.
But a spokesman for the Missouri Hospital Association, says the New York Times, and I'm adding, who wants to stay in good with the governor, said, because vaccines were available and there were now more options, the request for a statewide mask order then, that was an artifact.
Oh, okay.
So don't look to us to say you should get a mask. We're not going to be on the bad side of the governor here. We still have funding to argue about, and we're taking the governor's side on this.
Right. I don't want to be on the bad side of the governor, i.e. the bad side of Trump, because Trump is the governor of the state.
We still encourage people to use masks. Just, we want you to wear them. We just don't want you to be mandated.
Yeah. Right. Super effective. People are loving it.
Now, all of this happens with Omicron in the background. That's why it's just so interesting to have this now. And one of the things that's happening, and this is from a Kaiser Family Foundation study, is that vaccines are they went from 1 million a day to 1.5 million a day. It's a big jump.
Oh, good.
And a lot of it is boosters, but a lot of it is newer vaccines too. It depends where you look and how you look at it. A lot of the folks who say they don't want to get vaccinated are still in that position, but we're talking about 30% of the country, and that's slowly fading. And the reason that that's eroding is because of private mandates.
Oh.
I mean, you have to keep your job.
Yes. Okay. Right. That's working too.
So what's happening is they know they're losing that part of the argument.
Yeah.
So they're getting rather desperate about things because of that. And that's one of the reasons why they're now shifting the argument to masks.
Back to masks. Okay. I can see
Here's the
that.
New York Times. Vaccine demand grows in the U.S. and so do wait times. Many vaccination clinics and local officials are reporting long lines and delays in booking vaccination appointments. Our listeners wouldn't know that because we're already vaccinated.
Yeah.
But if you try to get it now, you can't walk in and just get it without an appointment.
Huh. Well,
Talk about
boosters?
Public health and public good. All right, so you have to wait a week.
Yeah.
Well, Biden.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks, Biden.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Biden. Well, hey, you have to wait a week to get a flu shot sometimes. This is not like the end of the world. But what the public needs to keep in mind is that we've got a stressed and strained healthcare delivery system, said Mitchell Rotholtz, the lead for immunization policy at the American Pharmacists Association. And that's because the pharmacies are giving out these vaccines. Vaccine demand has spiked from an average of under 1 million doses a day for much of October to 1.5 million a day in recent weeks, according to CDC data. Demand for boosters and first-time doses seems to be driving that increase.
All right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
good.
first-time
want the
doses,
booster.
yes. Boosters, yes. So, I wrote in the Pundit Roundup when I put that up. When was that? Whenever it was. Monday, December 6th, today.
Yes.
Stop panicking. Oh, wait. It appears the message to get vaxxed is getting out. And people complaining about panic appear to be disappointed. Oh, well, I'm over it. I hate when people talk about panic. Whenever it comes to public health and somebody says, stop panicking, what they're really saying is, you're asking me to do something I don't want to. So you're panicking, and I'm the rational one.
Yes.
And go back to that list of words and whether you want to describe your actions in neutral, positive, or negative terms.
Right, exactly.
Right? Are you being meticulous or stubborn? Now do testing, I said. Send test kits and masks to everybody, and if you need to fire Louis DeJoy to get it done, I'm over that too.
Yeah. Will we? I didn't even know. I mean, he'll stop mailing of these things, but...
Right. So here's a thread from, this looks like it's from the UK. Yeah, it's Associate Professor at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health.
Okay, we know them.
Right. A little over a week since it was announced, it's already clear that Omicron is serious. Some important pieces of evidence have begun to coalesce, while the worst outcomes still seem unlikely. What we have is quite bad enough. So this is a thread with nuance, he says. And before I read it to you, let me just say the data out of South Africa suggests that so far, early on in the Omicron wave, it doesn't seem to be as serious as the Delta wave. There's not as many people needing oxygen in the hospital, for example.
Okay, that's good.
But a lot of a little can still be a lot. Right? If you have overwhelming numbers going to the hospital, even though they don't need oxygen, you're still overwhelming the hospital.
Yes.
So it doesn't have to be worse than Delta for it to be bad if it turns out it spread easier.
Okay.
At the same time, we're already getting our asses kicked by Delta. Places like New Hampshire, Albany, New York are out of beds.
Oh.
These are the unvaccinated areas.
Yes.
And New Hampshire is pretty well vaccinated, but when you have pockets of the unvaccinated, 30% of the population, that's enough. So, first the spatial spread. Recall previous variants and the pace in which they were reported in different locations. Omicron's already on all continents other than Antarctica in slightly over a week since it got named. That's like, wow. Yes, we know to look for it. Yes, we've gotten better at all of that, but still, it's spreading wildly. Meanwhile, we get some relatively positive news in that hospitalized cases seem milder than previous waves. Well, you knew that because I just told you. The concern is that those infected and hospitalized so far are mostly young, and we would expect younger folks to have milder infections. We'd also expect them not to be vaccinated, so it's not surprising they wind up in the hospital. But that doesn't really tell you about the overall thing. If you want to compare apples to apples, you got to look at over 65s. If you want to compare apples to apples, by the way, you have to look at the effect of Omicron on somebody who's previously been infected with Delta, as well as somebody who's previously been vaccinated with both 2 and 3 shots differently. Okay. And you have to try to look at it in the same time frame. In other words, as Eli Prantsevich from Iowa, epidemiologist, points out, so is 6 months after you got your natural infection when your immunity wanes, just like 6 months after you got your vaccine? Have people looked at that? Have all the people citing natural immunity as being, it's so prevalent, everybody got sick, it's really important. Have they looked at what happens in the same time frame and looked at it the same way critically? No. All you read about is vaccines. You don't really see studies about what about people who are just plain old infected. We don't know that. And it may be that their immunity wanes even more after 6 months. So they may be even more vulnerable to something like Omicron.
Yeah, okay, I would like to find out. And
So there's two places I'm watching closely, Israel and the UK. Both are well vaccinated and studied by excellent scientists. One of them, the UK, that's why I thought he was from the UK until I saw where he was from, also has a pretty huge amount of ongoing Delta infection, offering us a head-to-head comparison with Omicron. Delta was rare. Omicron gives a particular result. Delta was rare in South Africa, I guess, in ZA.
I see. Okay. Z is, I don't know. ZA? What?
South Africa. I don't know what is referring to ZA. Omicron gives a particular result to some diagnostic tests, which we describe as spike gene target failure, or SGTF. If you see that term, it's a testing term referring to whether or not the test picks up diagnostic tests.
Okay.
Okay, and it could be used as a surrogate for looking for Omicron. So the UK has a pretty large amount of immunity from the combination of a good vaccination program and an incompetent initial response. If it doesn't get in the way of Omicron transmission, that's not good.
Okay.
In Israel, we have a fully boosted person transmitting to another. That's not data, it's anecdote. It's not that it can happen, it's how often does it happen. That's the question. So those are the questions that are on the table. None of this is rocket science, and there's still things we can do, but that's one of the reasons why we need more information. So early data out of South Africa is good but not helpful, because if it's younger patients and it's still early in the course, sometimes it takes a month for you to really, show up. And at the same time, if one person who's vaccinated gives it to another, that doesn't mean everybody does.
Okay.
With that, that's the summary. Here's your break, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, just trying to figure things out here, but there's still a lot left on the table. That was interesting, right? Greg was on his way out, just mentioned to me, well, I didn't think I had enough information, enough material to fill out an hour of the show, but it always works out that way. If you get to talking about it, that's kind of the premise of the show. So I'm glad that it did work out. I have seen in the meantime, in the last couple minutes, even more people retweeting what purports to be the Trump Christmas card. And I guess it's not a joke. I guess it's not somebody's idea of a spoof on a Trump Christmas card. I mean, unless it's just fooling everybody. But I can't believe that they would do that. I mean, the picture now, I've seen it recirculated by a few other people. And I mean, I guess it could be the case that everybody's being fooled by this spoof. But if not, I just can't believe it. This is another view of the thing. And everybody's saying the same thing. I can't believe the photo they chose. This is a ridiculous picture. It's not current. It's not relevant to anything. He looked terrible. So I don't know why they would choose this thing. Not only is he looking ridiculous in his white tie and tails, but he's, if he hasn't got a deep scowl on his face, he's certainly not smiling. Not that, Trump looks like it's not an attractive smile even when he gives one, but so not smiling. It's like a black and white photo of him, and the rest of the, I don't know. So it's photoshopped over some sort of Christmassy type background. His 5 kids, do they have them all here? Are they not the kids? Is one of them Melania? I can't even tell. Their faces are in these tiny Christmas ornaments, which are decorating not a tree but the top of the card. It doesn't make any sense. The whole thing is just like insane. You would look at this and say, you're fired for designing this. Ordinarily, I'll put it aside and I'll share it with you from at least one of the tweets. But this appears to be a serious thing, and people really I don't know, believe that this is the Christmas card. I can't tell you what's going on with this. One thing that we did forget to mention, and I thought of it during maybe during the first break and then forgot to get back around to it. It's nothing to really say about it other than to note for the record, because it happened. Bob Dole has died, and I don't know, he was like 96 years old, so full life certainly, and I saw a lot of people sort of commenting like, I thought he died like a little while ago. I didn't realize he was still alive, but a lot of reminiscences then about Bob Dole, including, all sorts of things. And I think somebody was circulating today a video from the Trump inauguration in 2017. Just an interesting comparison as people are leaving the stage, essentially, that they set up for the inauguration. Trump, of course, the first one out, and Barack Obama following him closely thereafter. Bob Dole is sitting up in the back of the staging area, the back of the seating area behind the stage, as people who are leaving will be retreating back into the Capitol. So he's like the last guy you see before the door leading into the Capitol. Very prominent position. And Trump sort of gives him a wave and a thumbs up, and he might even stop for a quick handshake, and then, does the triumphal wave around everybody else and disappears into the Capitol building very quickly. And Obama stops and gives him the handshake and then the two-hand clasp, and stops and talks and speaks with him and with his wife, and Liddy Dole is there, and it's a nice, warm visit. And it's supposed to, illustrate the difference between the two guys. But anyway, I thought that was illustrative anyway. But then those things are about Obama and Trump and not about Dole. So maybe not necessarily the best clip to be circulating. But Greg has sent me something here. What Larry Sabato saying, no politician ever had a better sense of humor than Bob Dole. Okay, we'll see. But my favorite Dole joke was his response to seeing Presidents Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, and Richard Nixon together in an event. Dole cracked, it's see no evil, hear no evil, and evil. And, okay, I suspect that there's better examples, perhaps, of his sense of humor. But remember, this is Larry Sabato doing the reviewing, and I don't know if I necessarily point to Larry Sabato as having a great sense of humor either, but okay. Anyway, the point is he did have a sense of humor about things, and people appreciated that. Okay, there are many other things that I should share with you today, some of which are put away in let's see. Oh, yeah, all right. Greg still commenting along like, who has a better sense of humor? I don't know whether he has a better sense of humor. The My Pillow guy? Is that what you're thinking in there? Okay. Well, anyway. At any rate, there's other things to catch up on. I really do need to spend some time, I think off the air, maybe catching up with what exactly was going on behind the scenes in the DOD with these generals and the National Guard, just to be up to speed on this thing. But it certainly seems like a big deal and a significant problem. But there's more about January 6th happening today, or more people discussing it in way. I don't know. Is this going to be helpful and insightful here, or I feel like we're going over the same ground? A lot of people trading links to this piece in The Atlantic that is entitled Trump's Next Coup Has Already Begun. It's a Barton Gellman piece. Subheader here is January 6th was practice. Donald Trump's GOP is much better positioned to subvert the next election. And I feel like this is probably, it's probably a very good write-up, because Barton Gellman tends to do a good job with everything, and this sort of thing in particular. And it seems extremely long, but it feels like from the outset, like we've heard this, right? Is this just going to be a description of how, one, he's succeeded in normalizing his January 6th activity to the extent that we're possibly going to look at blowing the whole thing off, but in addition that he's positioning Republican candidates to win key elections posts in the various states such that they'll be in position to overturn or negate the results of that state's election if they don't go for Trump and simply send Trump electors to a Republican Congress to be counted anyway. Is that, it looks like it's a good piece. And so I'll say a lot of people are recommending it. I will say perhaps it's something you want to put aside and check into, perhaps also off the air. But I do feel like it probably is going over ground that we have been over before. I guess we could say similar things about the piece here from David Rothkopf in the Daily Beast, similarly titled, "America is one gut punch away from throwing in the towel on democracy." Subheader here, "This is a moment to attend to the business of bringing together all Americans with a sense of aspiration and a common purpose before it's too late." Actually, slightly different, I suppose, in his approach to what's going on here. And maybe, just maybe, we can have a look at what he said. I got this article. This was also widely circulated, but I will mention that it was sent along by a listener. Again, I haven't made any prior arrangements about identification, etc., of all of that, but a listener and friend of the show who, unless he later gives me permission to identify him directly, I'll leave it out, but you know who you are. But saying essentially that, this might take a slightly different approach. That is that subheader that says, "This is a moment to attend to the business of bringing together all Americans with a sense of aspiration and common purpose before it's too late." And noting that Greg frequently does comment on the recommendations of Democratic strategists and elected officials, saying we should be focusing on the kitchen table issues, the things that motivate everybody's everyday decision-making and everyday life. But the suggestion here, at least from the subheader of the article, maybe we ought to dive into it. What about using America's founding principles and lofty aspirations as a focal point to bring people together? I suppose it's a worthwhile inquiry. And let's see, how long is this piece? I don't know. Widely discussed, though, so perhaps worth a little bit of our time. Let's see, what's the best format to read it in here? Maybe the pocket format here. But again, Dave Rothkopf, "America is one gut punch away from throwing in the towel on democracy." I remember the political gut punches, he begins. "They were moments that I could not believe were happening in America. They ran contrary to the idea of America that I had been raised with, but they also defied logic and reason." Turn you upside down. But by the way, another form of pre-wrong syndrome, right? You just found out that, it turns out that the true ideals of America are the opposite of what you thought they were, all of a sudden, because either five-robed justices say that's the case, or we're living in a world where the daily newspapers don't appear to take any particular umbrage at the idea of overthrowing the government by force on the day that the electoral votes are supposed to be counted. It's just a thing that happens. Both sides, somehow. Anyway, while America has been rocked by riots and assassinations, had been when I was a kid, the first big political development in America that shocked me was the election of Ronald Reagan. He was a boob, a Hollywood actor, and not a very good one even. At the time, just out of college, I did not really understand the darker forces that were behind his election. The racism and greed, the anti-government ideology that was really just a formula to enable the richest among us to make more, and the most racist states to chart their own course. Reagan, of course, offered a benign face to these changes. When the GOP was taken over by the hard right in the 1990s by men like Newt Gingrich and Tom DeLay, and the contract with America turned into a scorched earth campaign that deliberately left Washington dysfunctional because an inert government is the next best thing to no government at all, it was shock all over again. The extremism of the GOP was getting worse and worse, the nation's divisions growing deeper and deeper. Even the administration in which I served, that of President Bill Clinton, had bought into policies that made inequality worse and offered up the coded racism of welfare reform, beefing up police forces and scolding Sister Souljah. We were Reagan light, though we thought we were just doing smart political triangulation and that the goodness in our hearts would prevail. And then we undid Glass-Steagall and passed the Telecommunications Act that laid the groundwork for the rise of monster tech, the behemoths that would, alongside Wall Street, come to dominate in a new age of robber barons in America. When Al Gore won the popular vote but lost the election to George W. Bush thanks to a dubious, highly political call by the U.S. Supreme Court, that too was a gut punch. When Bush and Cheney and company embraced torture and rendition and waged a war of choice that left hundreds of thousands of innocents dead and America's reputation worldwide in tatters, that was another. We weren't the country of the greatest generation. Vietnam had already begun to make that clear, but this was war crimes level stuff, and somehow they all got away with it. Yeah, we decided to look forward, not backward. You know how it goes. Anyway, then came the election of Donald Trump, another one in which the person who got the most votes, one of the most highly qualified candidates in our history, was defeated. It was Reagan times 1,000. Instead of a plastic face from Hollywood, we got a corrupt sleazebag known to every New Yorker and to television audiences everywhere as one of the dregs of humanity. We saw him embrace the help of one of our greatest enemies to get elected. We heard him lie, and we watched in disbelief as he lost the popular vote but won in the Electoral College. The gut punches came more rapidly during the Trump years. There were the 30,000 lies, the Muslim ban, Charlottesville, the Russia cover-up, firing Comey. Oh, yes, that very much in the news today, too. Interview material about that very fact. The Mueller report and the clear obstruction case against the president. The Barr cover-up of that. One impeachment, Ukraine, and a second impeachment, and then the big lie on January 6th, along with hundreds of thousands dead from a needless public health catastrophe. For the first time in our history, there was not a peaceful transfer of power following a U.S. presidential election. This is not to say that America has ever been as advertised, but there was a sense that progress could be made. Deep divisions led to a civil war, but at least the end of slavery, at least in the end, slavery was ended. Okay, I was wondering about that. Weirdly phrased. Progress was made for women and people of color, and while that progress was agonizingly, appallingly slow, there was the Voting Rights Act, the steps forward won by the movements for civil rights and equal rights for women. Our system was fraught with problems, but you had a sense that many were being addressed, at least to some degree. But the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision gave the check writers more power over the bill writers in Washington, equated money with speech, and made a corrupt system even more corrupt and resistant to reform and progress. The Shelby County decision undid many of the benefits of the Voting Rights Act by prematurely declaring victory against racism in America. That does seem awfully stupid now, doesn't it? The Senate refused to hold even an overtly corrupt, unpatriotic, dangerous president to account. Republicans in the House defended his corruption and his attacks on democracy and added their own vileness and racism to the mix. And the GOP effort to pack the Supreme Court has now turned it into an overtly political, totally untrustworthy body, an institution acting on behalf of a tiny American minority instead of the people it was created to serve. Which brings us to the latest gut punch. Listening to the SCOTUS hearings on Mississippi's efforts to effectively ban abortion, it was clear that decades of effort by GOP extremists to pack the Supreme Court so as to advance a religious agenda opposed by the majority of Americans were about to bear fruit. A fundamental right guaranteed to American women for half a century is about to be taken away. It is about to be taken away by justices who swore under oath that Roe v. Wade was, quote, established law, but were lying so that they could undo that ruling. It's about as basic a statement of it as there is. They did not even have the grace to tread gently around the issue. From the first moment of the hearings, the case made by Mississippi's Solicitor General and clearly supported by the conservative majority of the court was that Roe haunts America, and they wanted to do it in. Justice Samuel Alito, the most odious of the extremists on the court, sought to justify a reversal by comparing Roe to Plessy versus Ferguson, the decision that provided the foundation for institutionalizing racism in the American South. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, the court's conscience, asked, "Will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts? I don't see how it is possible." It was, chillingly, the right question. The answer is clear. While the court will survive its coming decision overturning or profoundly narrowing Roe, its standing as an institution that is supposed to be above politics clearly will not. What then? After punch upon punch upon punch, what can we expect? The Supreme Court has been compromised. In the decades ahead, red state America will continue to be disproportionately empowered in the U.S. Senate. Were Republicans to win the House next year, we can expect more over-the-top, often dangerous behavior. Consider the gut punch of watching House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan or Speaker Kevin McCarthy in action. The GOP agenda of cutting taxes for the rich, literally the only major legislative goal or accomplishment of the last Republican administration, will lead to further inequality. Will abortion still be available in America? Yes, in blue states, available to those who can afford to travel to access the medical care they seek, but not to the poor, not to those who have been increasingly victimized in this country for the past 4 decades as inequality has gotten worse and worse. With this Supreme Court, more and more decisions will be left to the states, and the divide between red and blue America will grow ever greater. There won't be a civil war, we hope anyway, like there was in the 1860s, but people of color will increasingly be denied representation that reflects their views thanks to gerrymandering. Our inability to pass voting rights reform and Republican efforts to change election laws and procedures to give themselves an advantage. Despite the power of red state politicians, red state residents will increasingly be second-class citizens, denied not only the right to choose, but if the past few years are any indication, full medical insurance benefits or the protections that science-based policies might afford. The midsection of the U.S. will become a collection of anti-science, anti-history, anti-woman, anti-black, anti-immigrant, anti-federal government theocracies, minority-ruled faux democracies who will still depend on massive inflows of tax dollars from the blue states they'll nonetheless loathe and resent. It is hard to be optimistic about the future of such divided America. We will be weakened, will be diminished. Our divisions will become ever greater impediments to progress, and so will begin the precipitous decline of the United States. We will not be the shining city on the hill anymore, or the last best hope of the world. We will not even be able to stand up against the growing global threats that we face. Following the turning point in our first Civil War, a conflict that reflected many of the same divides that exist to this day, President Lincoln concluded his Gettysburg Address with the following words: "It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Well, you remember that. That we have failed in that assignment will be the ultimate gut punch. We will be neither who we were nor who we hoped to be. The only answer is, having endured the shocks of the past 4 decades, we recognize the potential cost of this cold civil war and choose another path, one that rejects the divisions sought by the American right, takes the steps necessary to undo the damage they are doing to our democracy, and, as President Biden and Democrats have sought to do, attends to the business of lifting up and bringing together all Americans with a sense of common purpose and of aspiration that too many of us seem to have forgotten. Well, it is aspirational, after all. Interesting as a political tactic. I don't know if I can evaluate it. I think I need to see some or I guess as a political strategy. I need to see the tactics that implement it before I can give you any sense of what I think the likelihood of success would be. But it's an interesting thought, and like I said, a widely traded article over the weekend. I guess the other big item that occupied a lot of time over the weekend was the slow revelation of the facts surrounding the family of the school shooter in Michigan. That was kind of a wild weekend ride. I gather that you're probably all up to speed on it now, and that reporting on the facts of it won't reveal anything new. But, one, as you know, they identified the shooter, and, it's not, we're still not really nationally all agreed on whether or not you give additional attention to the shooter by naming him. But if you don't, you miss out on all these other weird stories, like the background stories. So it was revealed, I guess, Friday, and then over the weekend that, just ridiculous, but I don't know what to do about it, series of events. Apparently, the shooter himself, who I guess is, we'll name him because I'm not doing any good. We're not hiding it. It's already out there. But what's his name? Crumbley, apparently. Crumbley, and Evan is the son here. The parents, as it turns out, I think we knew by Friday that the father had bought the gun. I put it aside, and I think we forgot to mention it, maybe even Thursday, that news had come out that this was a very recently purchased gun, the gun that was used in the shooting. The dad here, James Crumbley, apparently bought the thing on Black Friday. That was how he spent his Black Friday shopping. He picked up a 9mm Sig Sauer handgun, and apparently, though, there was more information over the weekend that this was something that he bought as a Christmas present for his son, for Evan. So that, gets us back into like Sandy Hook type territory here, that again, the parents are providing the guns that end up being used in the school shooting. But there's a lot more that apparently, they've had incidents in school with the kid. This was very interesting to me, being a Loudoun County resident and just having gone through the paroxysms that it is alleged swung the Virginia elections, and maybe, as Republicans would have it, was leading to some sort of, once again, more claims of a national political realignment of the suburbs and suburban voters behind Republicans because they were the ones speaking out for the kind of common sense values and Parents just want to have a voice in their kids' education and yada yada. But more than the CRT scandal, more than the masking and the vaccine things, and CRT, of course, not being a scandal at all, but the fake scandal about CRT. But, of course, we had the additional layer of the trans student issues and the rape in the high schools here that led angry parents and activists to say that what we needed was to take the heads of the school boards. And yet here in Michigan, it seems they ran into this kid in the system picked up on him early, as they found him Googling on his phone during class. And, you're not supposed to be doing that. And I guess the teacher asking what's going on here and confiscating the phone finds him to be Googling to buy ammunition online, like in bulk, I guess. And, golly, that's not an appropriate search, and parents notified, but nothing happens, and less than nothing happens. In fact, there's affirmative okay from mom, who texts him, LOL, I'm not mad at you, you just have to learn how not to get caught. Like, that's not really very helpful. And the prosecutor picked up on that in Oakland County, Michigan, and it was a prominent part of her presentation of the indictments against the two parents for providing him with the murder weapon. It didn't really help them a great deal, and it didn't help when they found out that they actually detected that very day, the same day of the shooting, they picked up on him doodling on his paper and drawing guns and dead kids and saying the thoughts won't stop. And they called the parents and they said, take him out of here and put him in counseling, and they declined to do so. And then they went on the lam. But you all know this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I feel like we ought to perhaps run quickly through the reporting of the Detroit Free Press to make sure we have all the details that were available, at least early part of the weekend, on the shooting. But I mean, I think you've probably all picked up this story that, yeah, the parents not only, I mean, more than neglecting their duties, they're like actually, turning away affirmatively from what they were being asked to do. The astonishing news that the very day of the shooting, the teachers in class pick up on the signals that this kid is ready to burst and possibly perpetrate a shooting there at the school, and that the parents are called in and decline to remove him from class, and apparently decline to do anything about the I don't know what power the school has to do this, but apparently the recommendation that he be removed from school and gotten into counseling immediately, like within 24 hours, you got to have this kid in counseling. He's that close to the edge, and they just said, nah, we're not going to do it, and wouldn't even take him home for the day, and they left him there, and they didn't bother asking anything like, that pistol we bought you the other day, do you have it with you? Nobody looked in his backpack to find out whether he was carrying the gun. I don't know whether he has a locker or anything you could look in either. And they walked away and left him. He was returned to class. He had been pulled from class because everyone was afraid. The teachers were afraid he was giving signs that he was going to be involved in a school shooting like as soon as that day. But parents wouldn't intervene, and so back to class. And just, again, I don't know what else you do. I mean, I guess it's interesting because the common sense thing, right? The everyday common sense average voter out there says it doesn't matter whether the parents want to take them out of school or not. You kick them out, throw them out for the day anyway, right? And if you have to have due process and go back and reinstate them, fine, go through the hearings. But for today, out, right? But school boards find their hands tied by, sensitive parents. And it's usually the sort of thing that the, average voter, the Archie Bunker types anyway, will be pointing to this stuff and saying, well, the parents all think their kids are, all parents think their kids are unique little gems. And they refuse to acknowledge that there could be anything wrong with their kid or anything wrong with the way they were raising them and yada, yada. And so, but they're usually talking about kids who, I don't know, for whatever reason, strike them as, as rotten kids or bad kids that need to be chucked out. But when it's their kids, of course, they too, all of a sudden, are beautiful and unique gems. I don't know what do you have to know to have, I've just bought my kid, I mean, on top of it all, I guess I should say at the end, right? So you got the school identifying them as troubled. They're drawing pictures of themselves shooting everybody and saying, I'm going to kill everybody and the thoughts won't stop, and all the red flags, right? And just keeping in mind that we talked about this at the end of last week with Marjorie Trader Green and her proclivity for following people around and harassing them on video. And one of the first things she screams about in one of her first stalking videos is, why are you in favor of red flag laws? So she's very vehemently opposed to red flag laws because they would be singling her out. She's the one they're supposed to be doing something about with these red flag laws. Well, here's one that they should have been doing something with. But as I saw over the weekend, somebody, half joking, they're really not even joking at all. The truth of it is that, on some parallel planet, in some alternate reality, you would have had that kid kicked out by a principal or school board or superintendent or somebody who steps in and says, this is ridiculous. The parents won't take him out of class, but we're not letting him back in. And then, you would save the day by kicking the kid out of school the day he perpetrated the school shooting. But in the meantime, the parents would be on Fox News and running a GoFundMe to pay for lawyers to sue the school with, and a big Fox chyron reading the tyrannical school principal thinks Second Amendment rights are mental illness, and that's why he kicked our son out. And they'd be raising all the money in the world, and it would be unfair and horrible and terrible, but the 4 kids would be alive. So, there is that to balance things out. Anyway, so they wouldn't do anything about it. They return him to class, and everybody's astonished by this. How could you have returned this kid to class? And that very day, he, in fact, then goes into the bathroom, I guess takes the gun out of his backpack, emerges from the bathroom, and starts shooting everybody. Ironically, the bathroom again. Something about the bathrooms at the schools are driving everybody insane. But here, like having lived through it here in Loudoun County, where the big issue over the rape case was you put him in you returned him to school. Well, they didn't return him to the school he went to. But they also hadn't, had the trial yet, and he had been charged with the rape, or I guess he hadn't. Well, I guess at some point he had to be was charged with it, but at the same time they couldn't deny him his education because he hadn't yet been convicted. So they moved him to the other school and they put the ankle monitor on him here. I mean, I guess they didn't have time to put an ankle monitor on him, and it wouldn't have helped anyway. But this kid probably should have been doing something with him, right? I don't know exactly what it is. I can't put my finger on it because it seems so impossible to have left this up to the school authorities to deal with. Just yet another thing that they have to deal with, for which they're really not equipped and trained. But at least they had some sort of procedure in place, and the parents wouldn't participate in it. They just want to have a voice in their kids' education. I don't know. I'm not certain what to draw from it, but here in Loudoun County, where we were told, common sense should obviously have prevailed and the kids should never have returned to school, and the only answer to this is to do something about the school board. But now it's a gun rights Second Amendment thing, and I don't hear any calls for the heads of the school board members over this for whatever reason, except this one involved murders, and we still don't have anybody calling for the heads of the school board. I wonder why that is. Anyway, to top it all off, the bigger story of the weekend was the fact that the parents then take off. Once they heard they're being charged, nobody checks, should we watch their house and make sure they don't leave? And in fact, they do. And I don't know. Now, I guess at this point, we'll read the Detroit Free Press thing and then comment off of that. James and Jennifer Crumley caught. After a while, they were in fact caught. But they were missing for quite some time. But they were picked up by the fugitive search unit, I guess they have there in Michigan. They were arrested after their vehicle was found in Detroit. Darcy Moran, Tyler Davis, Phoebe Wall Howard, and Alicia Anderson. Alicia. I can't tell which pronunciation they go with on this one. All the writers credited on this Detroit Free Press article from when? Let's see, today's the 6th. Saturday, the 4th. Here's the deal. James and Jennifer Crumbly, the parents of the teen charged in the Oxford High School shooting, were located and arrested early Saturday, in Detroit after a citizen saw their vehicle and called police. I don't even know how you would recognize it, but they did. Yes, they are both in custody and will be on the way to the Oakland County Jail soon, said Oakland County Under Sheriff Mike McCabe. Kudos to Detroit PD and all the other agencies that assisted. Police arrived at the scene and in the area of the 1100 block of Bellevue near East Lafayette, if you are a Detroit denizen, and you might know where that is. About 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m., Detroit Police Chief James White told reporters about 3 a.m. on Saturday morning. I guess that's when they had the briefing. Anyway, it's believed the Crumblies, facing charges of involuntary manslaughter connected to the Oxford High School mass shooting in which their son is accused, were led into a commercial building by someone, White said. Police know who that someone is, and those who aided the couple could face criminal charges, White said, and they should. The Crumblies were found hiding inside and were, quote, distressed, White said. They were unarmed, which is a lucky thing. But yeah, when they were missing, it was interesting. Apparently, the local sheriff made some comment about, well, we don't think they're particularly dangerous, or that we don't have any suspicion that they're armed and dangerous, or really that they're any particular, they were like hesitant to call them fugitives at that point. It's like, well, there's a pretty good chance they're armed and dangerous. Their son was, but maybe they only had the one gun between them. Who knows? Anyway, I just found that kind of interesting, plus more about once they were finally caught and arraigned. Anyway, where were we? Right. Chief White here said security video helped officers by revealing one of the Crumblies entering the building. Authorities had been searching for the Crumblies for most of the day on Friday after they were charged with 4 counts each of involuntary manslaughter in the shooting deaths at the high school in northern suburban Detroit. Their son Ethan is charged with terrorism and first-degree murder in the case. The Crumbly parents did not show for their arraignment Friday afternoon in Rochester Hills, and the U.S. Marshals Service offered a reward for information leading to their arrests. The tip led officers to search through the Bellevue building, home to several businesses. Police could be seen outside the building and in SWAT gear outside a nearby home. About 12:45 a.m., as other officers checked the area, combing nearby properties with flashlights. The area on Detroit's Near East Side is peppered with light industrial buildings and is located a couple blocks north of the Detroit River, just west of Belle Isle. Lots of local detail for those of you in the area. White praised his officers and said Detroit was going to use whatever manpower was necessary to aid the victims from the high school shootings in Oxford Township, about 45 minutes drive from where the Crumblies were discovered. The Tuesday tragedy has touched the whole country, he said. We've got a number of victims in Oxford. It takes as much manpower as it takes. We're tired of this, he said. I mean, it's awful. And it is. The investigation of the shootings and the search for the Crumblies was led by Oakland County Sheriff's Office. McCabe previously said the vehicle was found around 11:30 p.m. on Friday. The owner of the building arrived and saw the car at the back parking lot, knew it didn't belong there, and went to investigate. The building's owner immediately recognized the car from information put out by law enforcement, checked the license plate, which matched, and called 911. That's got to freak you out, huh? There was a woman nearby sitting near the car smoking a cigarette, McCabe said, adding that she walked away. I don't know why that's news. Sean O'Neill, 40, of Detroit, looked on with his wife, Jocelyn, as police worked about 12:30 a.m. The two had responded to a security company call that the alarm to their rare tropical plants business inside the Bellevue building was triggered. It could have been the cops working, he noted. The couple had arrived about midnight to see the massive police response. They've been searching with the dogs back there, and you see flashlights in the woods, he said, waiting for a chance to turn the alarm off. As of 1:10 a.m., police were stopping passers-by, shining lights, and requesting information about whether people had seen anything. By 1:45 a.m., the Crumblies were under arrest. The couple was turned over to U.S. Marshals and the Oakland Sheriff's Office, White said. They are expected to be arraigned on the criminal charges later on Saturday, and in fact they were. There's a little bit more about that in a linked article. If that's interesting, I went to scroll back to it and all the text disappeared. And we'll see whether it comes back and gives us the link no time soon. All right, we'll reload the article. But at any rate, I found it interesting that apparently they were arraigned, and I'd really love to have the linked article here because at some point they decided to let them go on $500,000 bail apiece, and it was like apparently they were adjudged not to be a flight risk, which is why they got bail at all, which is pretty amazing given that they were only apprehended after, disappearing and hiding out in a light industrial building in Detroit. That feels very risky in terms of flight. Like, you just did it, so I think maybe you're a flight risk. But anyway, that's how it goes for white folks in America these days. All right, so we've brought you up to speed on that. That was some kind of shocking evidence from over the weekend. Let's see. Other items worth discussing. I don't know. Gosh, there's a lot, and we'll see if we can sum up a few of them that have been waiting for a little while. Let's see. Let's do this one. This was kind of an interesting one. I didn't know what to make of this one exactly, and this one looks like it's going to fly under the radar for a while. And I don't know whether it's going to turn into anything or not here, but this one I spotted from The Hill. Lexi Lonas reports, Koch Industries buys a solar power company from a GOP Senate candidate. And let me read it to you, but this one struck me. I don't know whether, the facts are going to line up here or not, but I was immediately struck by, wow, this seems like a fantastic, as in evil genius, fantastic bit of campaign finance shenanigans here. I don't know what's really driving any of this, but as you know, Koch Industries is, they're what I guess you would call them, they're investors in, and they operate in the energy sector. So it's not completely out of the question that they might seek to acquire another energy industry company. Solar power, they haven't really been involved in, but looking forward, as much as they spend on global warming and climate change denialism, and as heavily invested in fossil fuels as they are, even fossil fuel industry oriented companies are investing in alternative fuel sources in an effort to be, positioned to continue to profit, even if their preferred fossil fuel profit center is flattened or outlawed, for that matter. They, are looking for alternatives to diversify their portfolio. So that could be what drives it. I guess what you'll need to see is if in the future, they're kind of a diverse company, the Koch Industries. So they're also involved in, I think, like paper products of some kind of, didn't they buy like Dixie cups or something like that? I don't know. I don't keep that close tabs anymore on what the Koch's business interests are. But I guess if this is an opportunity for them to just start diversifying their portfolio. We'll buy whatever business a Republican candidate for Senate or wherever important office might care to start. Like, gosh, that's a great business idea. You're such a visionary businessman. That's one reason we need you in Congress. But by the way, you're such a visionary. We'd like to buy your business, and we'll pay you some outrageous sum of money for it. And you can then use those profits to self-finance, quote unquote, self-finance your way into the United States Senate entirely thanks to us. And won't that be great for our agenda, our federal agenda, should you win? And, but how can you can't just give people $1 billion. But we can if we, quote unquote, buy their business. Now, I don't know that that's what's going on here, but it would be extraordinarily dangerous if it turned out to be the case, even if it turned out to be the case that Republican candidates for Senate got the idea that, you know what, a good thing to do in the next 6 months would be to go into the energy business and start a company. And gosh, look how quickly I turned around and flipped my company for a huge profit. I don't know. Just saying, keep an eye out for this one. Here's the facts of the article as reported by The Hill. Koch Industries on Tuesday announced it is buying a solar power company that was owned by an Arizona GOP Senate candidate. Koch Engineered Solutions, KES, said it bought Depcom Power, DEPCOM, all caps here, Depcom Power Incorporated, a company focused on building utility-scale solar power plants. So, big enough solar energy farms that you can actually provide electricity to, municipalities and such. The company was owned by Republican Arizona Senate candidate Jim Lamon, L-A-M-O-N, Lemon with an A instead of Lemon. I don't know how he pronounces it, who's challenging Senator Mark Kelly, the Democratic incumbent, in what is expected to be one of the most competitive races in the 2022 midterms, Axios reported. This acquisition is a major development for KES, as Depcom will enable our entry into the fast-growing renewables market, reinforcing our commitment to the electrical infrastructure market segment, Dave Dotson, president of KES, said. The Depcom acquisition is consistent with KES's vision to deliver innovative, mutually beneficial technical and service solutions for industrial value chains while simultaneously transforming. I'm just reading the business gibberish and having a laugh at that, but gosh. I'm going to read all the way through that because it's a masterpiece of business gibberish, right? Consistent with our vision to deliver innovative, mutually beneficial technical and service solutions for industrial value chains while simultaneously transforming our business to improve and create new industry platforms. Through our complementary capabilities, we can offer greater opportunities for our customers who are seeking solutions in this increasingly important and competitive space, he added. Okay, so dumbed down for the rest of us. They're in the energy sector and buying a solar power plant. How did they put it in the last paragraph? I can't recall how they did it, but there we are. They were building a utility scale solar power plant. So a solar plant aimed at actually providing electricity, not just on site for whoever built who put up the solar panels, but to farm it out and sell the electricity to others. Koch Industries is in that business of selling power and energy to others, so it's not inconsistent. All they're saying is, we usually burn oil or coal or natural gas for these things. We decided to diversify a little bit and buy a solar power one. The Depcom acquisition is consistent with that vision, blah, 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 then all the gibberish. The dollar amount on the deal was not put in the announcement, but Layman, whoever, the Senate candidate we're talking about here, said publicly after the deal that it was worth $1 billion, according to Axios. So that seems pretty interesting. Why wouldn't you put that in a release? By joining KES, we are combining forces and shared values and leveraging robust capabilities, more gibberish, and knowledge centers that will accelerate our ability to, this is really humorous, accelerate our ability to enhance our existing services and expand our offerings into new service lines and markets. Together we will further our mission to be the solutions provider of choice for our customers in the energy industry, Johnny Tall, CEO of Depcom, said. So, interesting in one thing a Republican Senate candidate is in the solar power industry. Like, I thought you guys thought all that stuff was too fruity for you or something. But apparently it's worth money, so they're willing to do it. And selling the business to Koch Industries is a very interesting tactic. I wonder what the Axios thinks. Axios is probably just their article just assessing the horse race as between Mark Kelly and Jim Lamon, whatever. I don't know whether I guess they haven't nominated their candidate yet, so it might just be that he doesn't win the primary still, but he's still got that hurdle. But I wanted to throw that one out there forget all the gibberish and the nonsense about whether or not it makes sense for Koch Industries to buy this thing or not. I think it's clearly in their interest to make it look like it's in their interest to buy it, and it might even be in their interest to buy it. But I would keep a close eye on that and how much of the $1 billion Jim Lemon, whatever his name is, makes available to himself as support for his candidacy, because this would be a great workaround for the Koch brothers to simply have Republican Senate candidates declare themselves to be in the energy business. And, it's just a bad business decision, but there's not that much you can do with it if they repeatedly acquire the businesses of Republican candidates, for outrageous sums of money, and then they go on and win, thanks almost entirely to the generosity of Koch Industries. And I don't know that our campaign finance system is equipped to deal with that, which of course means it's ripe for exploitation, and they should probably go ahead and do it. And by the time we figure out that it's bad and something we don't want, it'll be too late. And there'll be 6 new Republican senators, giving them an overwhelming advantage, as they already have in the Senate. And golly, next time we'll be on to it. But for now, they're legitimately elected, and there just seems to be nothing we can do. What an unfortunate circumstance. So I wanted to raise that possibility here and do it early. And you can say, gosh, I heard about that first on Kagro in the morning, and then watched nobody do anything about it. Speaking of other things that probably shouldn't be happening, and this one I think will probably they'll have a harder time implementing, but just noting for the record, saw it prior to the weekend down in Florida. Florida man Ron DeSantis, according to CNN and others now, proposes a new civilian military force that eats jumbo shrimp in Florida that he would control. Sounds like a great idea. It's parallel to my own suggestion for the weekend of an even more Supreme Court for the federal government here, but that I would control. And I figure if he can do that, then I can do this, and we're on even footing. Steve Contorno. I don't know Steve Contorno, but he's reporting for CNN on this from out of St. Petersburg. Governor Ron DeSantis wants to reestablish a World War II-era civilian military force that he, not the Pentagon, would control. DeSantis pitched the idea Thursday as a way to further support the Florida National Guard during emergencies like hurricanes. The Florida National Guard has also played a vital role during the pandemic in administering COVID-19 tests and distributing vaccines. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it or not. But in a nod to the growing tension between Republican states and the Biden administration over the National Guard, DeSantis also said this unit, called the Florida State Guard, not the National Guard, the State Guard, would be, quote, not encumbered by the federal government. He said this force would give him the flexibility and the ability needed to respond to events in our state in the most effective way possible. How do you know that? We just said it. That's how. DeSantis is proposing bringing it back with a volunteer force of 200 civilians, and he is seeking $3.5 million from the state legislature in startup costs to train and equip them. States have the power, of course, to create defensive forces separate from the National Guard, though not all of them use it. Did you know that? If Florida moves ahead with DeSantis' plan to reestablish the civilian force, it would become the 23rd active state guard in the country, DeSantis' office said in a press release, joining California, Texas, and New York. I don't think I knew about that. These guards are little-known auxiliary forces with origins dating back to the advent of state militias in the 18th century. While states and the Department of Defense share control of the National Guard, state guards are solely in the power of a governor. That does sound a little disturbing and upsetting, and not something I really want to turn over to DeSantis, of all people, but interesting that they are apparently already in existence. There's a little bit more to this article, and I recommend you read it. I think I will as well. Just thought I would also use a minute or two here to inform you of the latest or that there is more. I guess maybe we'll save it for another day to discuss it. But, there's further developments on the tension over vaccine mandates as between the Pentagon and the Oklahoma National Guard as well. Maybe Oklahoma needs a state guard, and then all the people can quit the National Guard and join the state guard instead. I don't know whether DeSantis is doing this as something that maybe it caught his eye over vaccine mandates, maybe not, but he's certainly the kind of guy you don't really want to have a armed civilian. That's interesting too. Civilian military. It's an oxymoron if I ever heard it. Anyway, I'll check more into it. Just thought I would put that on the record along with the other weird possible campaign finance disruption the disruption to end all disruptions. We'll check back in on that tomorrow. Maybe Joan will be interested in talking about it, and we'll follow it up during the week. And now, time to turn it over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, following us right here on Netroots Radio. So please do stay tuned. Let's see what he's got in store for you.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's a new thing. A Ninth Circuit judge has had it with Trump's judges insulting dissents. We'll check in on that one. That sounds interesting. Plus, a Tennessee appeals court ordered a new trial for a black man convicted by an all-white jury that deliberated in a room full of Confederate symbols. That sounds like a good idea to reevaluate the outcome there, don't you think?